Once upon a time, in a village called Atani, there was a young girl named Simi. She lived with her mother and her younger brother, Femi. The village was surrounded by thick forests, and there were many secrets hidden within those woods. The people of Atani believed that the forest held magic, and they were always careful not to wander too far. But Simi was curious. She had heard tales of a hidden stream deep in the forest, a stream that could grant wishes. Few villagers knew exactly where it was, and many people thought it was just a story to keep children from wandering too far. One day, something happened that changed everything for Simi. Her mother fell very ill. She could not get out of bed. The village-known herbalist and healer was invited to attend to her, and nothing the village healer gave her seemed to work. Simi watched her mother grow weaker each day, and her heart felt heavy. She loved her mother dearly, and she could not bear to see her suffer. Simi decided that she would do anything to save her mother, even if it meant finding the hidden stream in the forest, because she heard of several stories of what the hidden stream has done for people that went looking for it for a solution. Early one morning, before the sun had fully risen, Simi packed a small bag with food and water. She told Femi, her younger and only brother, to stay by their mother's side and promised she would come back soon. Femi, who was only 16 years old, looked at his sister with wide, worried eyes. "Where are you going to?" he asked. "To find healing for Mama," she said. "Be careful, Simi," he said, holding her hand tightly. Simi smiled and nodded, though she felt a little scared inside. She kissed her brother's forehead and then set off toward the forest. The forest was quiet that morning, and the air felt cool against Simi's skin. She walked along a narrow path, her eyes scanning the trees around her. As she went deeper, the sunlight barely reached the ground, and the shadows grew longer. Simi knew she had to be brave. She thought of her mother and how much she needed her. That thought kept her moving forward. After walking for hours, Simi began to feel tired. She sat down on a rock to rest and took a sip of water from her animal skin water jar made for her by her mother. She started to mutter words to herself that could be heard by herself alone. Suddenly, there was a movement that drew her attention. She looked around. She noticed something strange. There was a small bird perched on a branch nearby, staring at her. Its feathers were of different bright colors, and its eyes seemed almost human. Simi had never seen a bird like that before. The bird chirped and then flew a little farther into the forest, stopping to look back at her. It was as if it wanted her to follow. Simi stood up, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. She decided to follow the bird. It flew from branch to branch, leading her deeper into the forest. The trees grew thicker, and the air felt heavy. Simi's steps were careful, and she could hear her own breathing. The bird led her to a part of the forest she had never seen before. There, hidden behind thick vines, was a small dark opening. Simi pushed the vines aside and inhaled the air. In front of her was a beautiful stream. The water was clear and sparkled like diamonds. It flowed gently, and the sound of it was like music. Simi's heart filled with hope. She had found the hidden stream of Atani. She knelt by the water and whispered her wish. "Please, heal my mother," she said, her voice trembling. She cupped her hands and took a sip of the cool water. It tasted sweeter than anything she had ever tasted before. Suddenly, the ground beneath her began to shake. Simi looked around, her eyes wide with fear. The trees, leaves, ground and rocks seemed to move, and the sky grew dark. The blue beautiful colored bird flew away, its wings flapping uncontrollably. Simi stood up, her heart racing. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew she had to leave. She turned and ran, her feet slipping on the damp ground. The forest seemed different now, almost alive. Branches reached out, rocks blast, the source of the stream seemed to boil, dry leaves twisting in the air, all trying to stop her. Simi pushed through. Her only thought was to get back to her mother and Femi. When she finally reached the edge of the forest, the shaking stopped. The sky cleared, and the sunlight returned. Simi was breathing heavily, her legs trembling. She looked back at the forest, her heart still pounding. She had found the hidden stream, but something told her that the magic of the forest was not to be taken lightly. Simi hurried back to the village, her heart filled with both hope and fear. She ran to her home and found Femi sitting by their mother's side. Her mother was still lying in bed, her face pale and her breathing shallow. Simi knelt beside her and held her hand. "Please be better, Mama," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. To her amazement, her mother's eyes slowly opened. She looked at Simi and smiled weakly. "Simi," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. Simi felt tears spill down her cheeks, and she hugged her mother gently. Femi clapped his hands in joy, his face lighting up with hope. But as the sun set that evening, something strange happened. A shadow moved outside their home, and Simi felt a chill run down her spine. She looked out the window and saw a figure standing at the edge of the house. It was tall and dark, with eyes that glowed like sparks. Simi's heart skipped a beat. She knew, deep down, that this was not over. The forest wanted something in return. The next morning, Simi woke up feeling uneasy. Her mother seemed better, but she was still weak. Simi could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. She remembered the figure she had seen the night before, and a sense of dread filled her heart. She decided not to tell her mother or Femi about it. She didn't want to worry them. But deep down, Simi knew that the forest had its own rules, and she had broken them. As the days passed, strange things began to happen in the village. The crops in the field started to wither, livestock were dying, and the river that ran through Atani began to dry up. The villagers were worried, and they gathered to discuss what could be done. Simi listened to their worried voices, her heart heavy with guilt. She knew that it had something to do with her visit to the hidden stream. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, on her way from the market, Simi was confronted by a scary-looking old man. His hair was white, and his eyes were sharp and knowing. He looked at Simi. "You came to the hidden stream," he said, his voice low and serious. "The forest is angry." Simi's heart sank. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I only wanted to save my mother," she said, her voice trembling. The old man sighed and shook his head. "The forest does not give without taking. You must return what you have taken, or you, your family and the entire village will suffer." When Simi got home, Simi felt a wave of fear wash over her. She looked at her mother, who was sleeping peacefully, and then at Femi, who was breaking firewood outside. She could not let her family or her village suffer because of what she had done. She knew she had to go back to the forest and make things right. The next morning, Simi packed her bag again. She told Femi to stay with their mother and promised she would come back soon. Femi looked at her with tears in his eyes. "Are you going back to the forest, Simi?" he asked, his voice small and scared. Simi nodded and hugged him tightly. "I have to, Femi. I have to make things right. The gods are already angry with me. If I don't do something quick, I am afraid something terrible might happen to me, you or our mother that I am trying to save, but promise not to tell Mama," she said. This made Femi look scary and left his sister to go get the solution to the looming predicament. With a heavy heart, Simi set off toward the forest once more. The air was thick with tension, and the trees seemed to whisper as she walked. She knew this journey would be very different from the previous one. But she summons up courage to face the battle. The forest was not just a place of beauty and magic, it was a place of power, and it demanded respect, she said. Simi took a deep breath and stepped into the woods with their shadows, determined to face whatever lay ahead. Simi walked deeper into the forest, her heart pounding with every step. The trees stood tall around her, their branches twisting like old, wrinkled hands. She could hear the soft muffled, crackling sound of leaves, as if the forest itself was whispering secrets. She knew she had to find the hidden stream again, but she was not sure what the forest wanted from her. Knowing whatever happens, there was no turning back. As she moved forward, the ground beneath her feet felt soft, almost like it was breathing. Simi's legs felt heavy, and her hands trembled. She could not help but think of her mother and Femi. She wanted to be back home with them, safe and sound. The flash of all the pains that the villagers are going through, the droughts, the deaths, the suffering of the people because of her actions, but she knew that the only way to keep them safe and be free is to face the forest's anger. Suddenly, Simi heard a sound behind her. She turned quickly, her eyes scanning the trees. At first, she saw nothing, but then she noticed a shadow moving between the branches. It was the same tall figure she had seen at the edge of the house. Its eyes glowed like a small piece of burning or glowing coal, and it moved silently, as if it were part of the forest itself. Simi felt a chill run down her spine. She wanted to run, but she knew she had to stay strong. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice shaky. The figure stepped closer, and Simi could see its face more clearly. It was covered in dark, twisted bark, like the skin of a tree. Its eyes were bright, and they seemed to look right into her soul. "I am the guardian of the forest," the figure said, its voice echoing like the wind. "You took something precious and important from the hidden stream, and now the forest demands something in return." Simi swallowed hard. "I only wanted to save my mother," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The guardian nodded, its eyes narrowing. "The forest does not forgive easily. You must bring something of equal value to what you have taken. Or else you pay with your life or that of your brother Femi." Simi's heart sank. How did this strange being know the name of her younger brother Femi? She had no idea what the forest wanted. "What must I bring?" she asked, her voice trembling. The guardian pointed to a path that led even deeper into the forest. "Follow this path, and you will find what you need. But beware, the journey will not be easy. You will face challenges, and only if your heart is true will you succeed." Simi took a deep breath, her hands clenching into fists. She knew she had no choice. She nodded and turned to follow the path. The guardian watched her silently as she disappeared into the shadows. The path was narrow, and the trees grew thicker the further she went. The air was cold, and Simi could hear strange noises all around her, rustling leaves, distant rumbles, and the sound of something moving just out of sight. She tried not to think about what might be watching her. She kept her eyes on the path and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. As she heard a noise from top of a tree and looked, she saw another beautiful bird that looked like a parrot of different shapes and beautiful feathers. The bird was whistling and seems it was talking or singing to Simi. The bird distracted Simi for a long time until a strong breeze came from nowhere and the bird flew away. At this point Simi realized that the bird came just to distract her from the true path. After what felt like hours, Simi came to a clearing. In the middle of the clearing stood a tree unlike any she had ever seen. Its bark was silver, and its branches were covered in bright red leaves. At the base of the tree was a small pool of water, shimmering in the dim light. Simi stepped closer, her heart pounding. As she knelt by the pool, she saw her own reflection staring back at her. But something was different. Her reflection looked sad, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. Simi felt a lump form in her throat. She knew that this pool held more than just water. It held her story, her past, her fears, her worries, and her sadness. Anxious to find out what happens next in this story? Subscribe to our channel to get notified of every of our latest videos. Thanks for watching.